It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Good evening, everybody who are watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. We have a great show for you tonight. Very excited to be back here with you tonight on Tuesday. We have a lot to talk about tonight, lots to get into, big show, and there's so much to catch up on. So much has happened this weekend to discuss. Our featured story, we're going to talk all about the Charlie Kirk Memorial on Sunday, and there's a lot to say about it. You all saw it, I'm sure. That was their intention. It was a giant spectacle. And I'm going to be very critical about it tonight, about the message, about the optics of it. And I want to do it in a respectful way. I want to do it with respect to Charlie Kirk, a man who has passed, his family, his friends, who I'm sure are grieving. But this is politics. And this is a big part of politics. And by that, I mean, we see over and over and over, time and time again, sentiment, emotions, crisis. These are the extraordinary circumstances that politicians traffic in. We all have a sense of identity, and we all have an intentional idea of what we support and our values and our beliefs. We all think we know who we are and what we're about until a catastrophe happens, until a crisis happens. And then everybody's emotions skyrocket and sentiment is cranked up. And whereas ordinarily we think we know who we are and we think we know what we're about and what we support and what we believe in, it is in extraordinary times when we tend to get dragged along into things that maybe ordinarily we wouldn't support and maybe ordinarily we wouldn't go with. And that is because when tragedies and catastrophes happen, when fear, panic, and other emotions come in, it makes us influenceable. It makes us easy to manipulate. And it makes us easy to manipulate because certain things are raised up which are beyond reproach, which people believe are beyond criticism. Some things are off limits and protected. And that's how that works. And so the reason I say all this and the reason I lay that out, maybe that sounds strange, I think this is one of these moments. And we talk a lot on the show about false flags, about things like 9/11, about October 7th. And as you know, I don't believe the killing of Charlie Kirk was a false flag. I'm unconvinced that it's some type of operation. But like false flags, like these other manufactured crises, whether they're organic or manufactured, what it has in common is that cynical people very quickly move in to take advantage and push an agenda. And what I saw on Sunday is that. That was on full display. Whatever you think about the tragedy that took place 2 weeks ago, just under 2 weeks ago, whatever you think about the killing of Charlie Kirk and who was responsible, people are taking advantage. And I think that there is no other way to say it, no other way to describe what took place on Sunday other than that. And I don't like it. I don't like who is taking advantage of it, and I don't like what they intend to do with it. And I'll talk about that in great detail tonight. Like I said, trying to be respectful. But I'm also going to be a little audacious and bold. I think you have to be. I think that, and like I said, the reason I prefaced it that way is because throughout my entire life, and I think all of us have experienced this on our journey, our red pilling journey, our ideological journey. We see this crop up over and over. A tragedy, a catastrophe, a terror attack, whatever you want to say. And it's in those extraordinary circumstances when certain things are not allowed to be criticized or questioned, certain agendas are pushed very forcefully, and it's always weaponizing the feelings, the passions of the moment, the passions of the crowd. And so you want to be respectful, but it is politics, and we have to recognize that this is part and parcel of politics. We have to feel comfortable approaching those subjects like adults, and not get caught up in the moment. So anyway, so we'll talk all about the memorial tonight. Like I said, I'm sure you saw it, and they were pushing a very big agenda on Sunday. And we'll talk about precisely what that agenda is. If we have time, we're also going to talk tonight about this H-1B visa scam. Get a load of this. Fell for it again and again. Yeesh. And it's so interesting. Last week we were going to cover this on the show. I didn't have a chance to because I think I was going to cover it on Thursday or Friday, but I just ran out of time. There was this big announcement in the Oval Office last week with President Trump and the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and they announced a new policy for the H-1B visa program. So the H subcategory, that's temporary workers. You have H-1B, H-2A, H-2B. It's a category of temporary workers. It's an immigration program. And this is a way to meet the labor demands of the American economy with immigration. H-1B is a subcategory. It's for specialized labor. And it is basically the biggest scam in our immigration system. It's just this pipeline of cheap labor, originally perhaps well-intentioned, or maybe there was a kernel of a good idea there, but basically, from the beginning, it's just been abused to undercut American labor with cheap foreign labor. This is one of the most egregious immigration scams being run on the country. And there was a lot of concern when Trump got into office about what he would do with the program. Silicon Valley wants limitless H-1B visas. They want an unlimited number of these temporary visas to be given out to mostly Indians as well as other Asian migrant workers. And we thought that Trump would open up this cap on H-1Bs at the behest of Elon Musk, his biggest donor, as well as others in his orbit currently inside the administration. We were surprised, however, last week when Trump made an announcement that he was going in reverse. And he was not going to open up the cap and have unlimited H-1Bs, but on the contrary, he was going to impose a massive fee on H-1B visas. He was going to increase the fee for an H-1B visa from roughly $2,000 to $5,000 per visa to $100,000 per year. This is huge. Because if you understand the problem with H-1B, the problem is it makes foreign labor more competitive than native labor, American labor. Foreign labor is cheaper. They're willing to work for lower wages. They are dependent on their employer for their visa and for their residency inside the country. So there's all sorts of other things the employer can get away with. So if the government imposes a $100,000 per year fee, that makes it far more competitive to hire American labor. And so this is good for the American worker. That is what was announced last week. And I and many other people said this is amazing. I didn't get the opportunity to cover it in great detail, but on my show last week, very briefly, I said this is amazing. This is a great policy. And although I would prefer that they get rid of H-1B altogether, this is maybe the next best thing because it kind of remedies the economic problem with it, the economical problem with it, it makes American labor more economical. It makes it cheaper, more efficient. Well, before we even got a chance to cover this announcement, it turns out it's a lie. The whole thing is a lie. It's not a $100,000 per year fee. It's a one-time fee. They pay a one-time $100,000 fee, and then these companies get the workers for 6 years. And then they could get a green card after that. So you can effectively amortize that $100,000 over the life of the visa. So it's not going to make any kind of difference. Silicon Valley will happily pay a one-time $100,000 fee. But it gets better. Not only, and by the way, they just straight up lied. Howard Lutnick said like 5 times, it's annual. They pay it every year. And then we find out over the weekend, it's not annual. So they just lied. They just misrepresented what it was. But it gets better. They also come out when they release the details and say that this fee will not apply to current H-1B visa holders. So there's tons of H-1B visa holders in the country. They greenlight over 100,000 of these every year. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. It's in my notes here. But they greenlight over 100,000 H-1B visas per year. There's many of them already in the country. What would be great about the policy is that they would have to be a part of the program to retain the existing immigrant labor pool. You would need to pony up and pay $100,000 per year. Well, it doesn't even apply to all the existing visa holders. And then after the weekend, they start announcing carve-outs. And they say that, well, it doesn't apply to doctors and maybe might not apply to other workers. So they just lied about what it was. This sucks. We want the H-1B program to be scrapped. They say we're going to charge people money. Well, not nearly as much as they said, and we're not even charging the current visa holders. It happens every week, guys. Every week. Fell for it again. Like, you just can't trust anything that they say because they lie. They lie, they overpromise, they underdeliver. They promise you one thing, then they pull the rug out from under you. And I hope, at the minimum, this is a demonstration that I'm being objective, selfishly. Because when they announced the policy, I said, this is terrific. I've been critical of the administration, but this is a step in the right direction. Well, you just can't believe anything they say because, well, it was a lie. So we fell for it again. I normally don't fall for it, but this time I fell for it. They lied. 3 days later, we found out it's just not even real. So I don't know if we'll have time to go deep into it, but if we do, we'll cover that as well. Those will be our 2 big news stories for the night. Before we get into it, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about the episode tonight. Before we get into the news, just a couple of things to get out of the way. I'm a little bit tired. I don't know if you could tell. I don't know how I'm doing right now because I am exhausted. I traveled back today from Florida, sort of a last-minute deal. I flew out this weekend to Fort Lauderdale to do the Patrick Bet-David PBD podcast, and it debuted this morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. It's already at 1 million views, which is unbelievable. I think the premiere peaked this morning at 70,000 live concurrent viewers, and then it just kept blowing up. It's been live for about 12 hours. It hit 1 million views. It's one of the bigger shows. It's unbelievable. And so I just got home today. I'm a little exhausted, but I hope you all love the show. We finally got it together. As you know, this has been a highly anticipated collaboration. My fans have been, they really been giving Patrick Bet-David a hard time. asking him at Turning Point, and people were coming up to him at the Charlie Kirk Memorial saying, when are you going to have Nick Fuentes on the show? And it was already in the works. And so they called me up last week and they said, can you get out here as soon as possible? I said, well, given the climate, I said, I'm taking care of some security things, but we got it together pretty quickly. And so I flew out there. We did the show last night. Like I said, it came out this morning. And I have to say, I think it went great. I didn't really know what to expect. I've never talked to Patrick Bet-David before. I've never had a phone call, text message, never met him. But I thought it went great. I thought it was a fair, objective interview. And I saw some of my fans, they said, well, we've heard a lot of these stories. In fairness, he was going through my backstory because, well, we never met before. But I think that was actually a good thing because he was introducing me to his audience. And he, and I think a lot of the people in his audience, they don't know anything about me. And all they know, and I think maybe the same is true of him, is what they see in the clips. What they've heard, what they see in the clips. And you know how the clips are. They're funny, but they're also provocative. And it's colorful language and it's hyperbolic. And if you only saw the 30-second clips, you might think I'm a lunatic. You might think I'm a total maniac. So I think it's important to do these kinds of interviews where you sit down with no preconceived idea. You don't come in with a loaded gun pointed at the other person's head, metaphorically, you know, ready to read them the riot act. You said this, you said that. Are you racist? Are you a Nazi? I think it's important to have these kinds of conversations where you sit down and you say, where did you come from? How did you develop your views? What are your views? What's your background? So I thought it was a really good preliminary interview. Again, for people that maybe don't know about me, don't know my views, maybe they never gave me a chance before. And even for him as a guy, like I said, we never had contact before. I thought he was very fair, very objective. We walked through the timeline. We just leveled with each other. And I was honest with him about kind of how I came to be the way I am, and not just my political station, but also my political views. And I think he was honest with me too. He had some constructive criticism. And as you know, the N-word cast a long shadow over this encounter. I like to use that word. He hates the word, doesn't like the word at all, doesn't think I should say it. And he gave me his feedback on that. And you know what? And I take the feedback. I take it in the spirit it was given, which is, you know, he's older than me. He's built an incredible operation. Guys, you should have seen it. It's unbelievable. They've got this massive complex. They got a gym. They got a computer room, studio. I mean, it's unbelievable. They have like an army of people. It's one of the most impressive operations I've seen. And anyway, I don't know how I got on that, but point being is I respect his opinion. So, of course, I have my style. He has his style. We come from different generations, different countries. I'm from Chicago. I'm a little animated. I'm a little colorful, right? But he gave me his feedback, and I take it in the spirit it was given, which is, I think he cares about America. I think he cares about the state of the discourse, which is obviously the subject of the discourse now with Charlie Kirk's assassination. And as an older guy, you know, I respect it. You know, he's an elder. So I appreciate it, actually, in a sense. So I thought it was great. I like him. This guy, he's a big guy. I've never seen him before in person, but he's like a gangster. He's like a big guy. But I like his energy. And I have to say that in the right-wing space, you come into contact with a lot of different kinds of people. I really like the people on our side. I don't always agree with them on everything, and I'm extremely political. I'm extremely religious and right-wing. But what I mean by that is in the right wing, we are overlapping with the UFC world, with guys like Jake Shields, the poker world, guys like Dan Bilzerian. And there's some other gamblers, like some of the super chatters on this show. And you also have some of the business people, some of the grind set guys like a Patrick Bet-David. And I have to say what they all have in common, a guy like a Jake Shields, a Dan Bilzerian, a Patrick Bet-David, is with each of these different domains, whether it's the fighting, poker, and everything that Dan does a lot of stuff, business, is I like that they're all straight shooters. They're all like no bullshit. There's this level of positivity. It's what they do is generative. It's positive. And there's also there's kind of this culture of we're just going to talk. It doesn't need to be politically correct. There's no pretense. There's no beating around the bush. And so I like the energy. Even if, like I said, there's kind of a generational difference and a stylistic difference, he's got a good energy. I like businessmen. I like fighters. I like gamblers. I like these kinds of guys. So I thought it was a great interaction. I liked him a lot. Got a really good vibe from him. I got to see our friend Adam Sosnick again, and he did not disappoint. He's a funny guy. So it was really solid. I really enjoyed my time down there. And he said he wants to do another one. So I put out on Twitter, I said, thank you so much for the fair interview. And honestly, this is the other thing I want to say about it just quickly. You really got to give him a lot of credit. I know on our side, and I get it, I know a lot of the Groypers, they're demanding, bring Nick on the show, and please don't stop. I love it, and we need that. You got to understand on the other side of it, these other people, they've got employees, they've got a business. It's risky to have me on their show. As you know, it's a real risk. And credit where it's due. Think about all the people that have platformed me over the years before this stuff was popular. I think about people like Myron, Sneeko, Pearl, and there's so many, but I think about those three in particular because they all had me on their show in 2022, 2023, really right before all this stuff became mainstream, and they got shot out of the sky, every single one of them. They got in right before it became mainstream, literally right before the censorship let up, right before it became popular. And so it's all, in a way, it's sort of like tragic. It's like Pearl, her whole company blew up. Myron got demonetized. Sneeko lost his manager, tons of different stuff. And so it really does come with a risk. You never know what you're going to get. And those are just a few. There's so many over the years that have lost something for having me on the show. And so you look at a guy like Patrick Bet-David, he's got to be sitting there thinking, I don't know this guy. The guy kind of comes across like a troll, like a jagoff. I don't know if he's going to come on my show and be a shock jock. Am I going to bring this guy on my show and risk, he's got responsibilities. So it really actually does take a lot of integrity to go out on a limb like that for the sake of the conversation. Because I am one of the most talked about people right now. There is a lot of interest. I am in the middle of many different conversations about Israel, about black crime, about Charlie Kirk. I'm in the middle of a lot of it. People want to hear from me. People want to hear, who is this guy? And so, there's really no business upside. People say, well, he's going to get a lot of views. He already gets a lot of views. He's got millions of subscribers. It does actually take integrity and courage to bring me on the show for the sake of you want to get to the bottom of the conversation. You want to find out the truth. You want to do a service to your audience to bring interesting guests. I give them a lot of credit, and I think the Groypers should as well. And I also just want to reiterate in general, the Groypers are very intense. We have to be just as intensely positive towards people that do the right thing as we are negative towards people that do the wrong thing. Groypers are quick to critique and quick to judge. We should be just as charitable and kind to people that do the right thing. And so I hope everybody shows him some love. Go watch the interview, comment on it, follow him on Twitter, check it out, because we want to build bridges. We want to get into the mainstream. We want to be a part of the solution. We want to be in the action, you know? And that means we have to have a mindset towards that. So anyway, so I really do appreciate him having me on the show. Credit where it's due. And I said it's the gold standard because not many other people are doing this right now. And, you know, I don't want to call people out, but Piers Morgan said I'm banned from his show. Other people have said the same thing. Tim Pool won't have me on the show. Patrick Bet-David is a huge show, and he brought me on, and I appreciate that. And here's a guy, you can really give him credit because he runs the whole and I know I'm like doing tricks on it right now. I know I'm glazing, but this is important. He had on Bibi Netanyahu. He had on Nick Fuentes. He had on Thomas Rousseau. Everybody and their brother is calling Patriot Front, Fed Front. They're federal agents. How many of them had the founder on the show, uncensored, and ask him questions? Are you a Fed? Yes or no? Why? How many other people have platformed? And I'm not even the guy's biggest fan. That's integrity. Dan Bilzerian and Netanyahu, Thomas Rousseau and Nick Fuentes, Donald Trump and Alex Jones, Andrew Tate. I mean, they're racking up everybody on that show. So credit where it's due. I'm not just glazing. I do think that's admirable. So anyway, so check it out if you haven't seen it. Like I said, if you are a groiper, you know, you've heard a lot of the stories before, but it is a good conversation. So check it out. That's that. And I'm looking forward to the next one. He said he wants to do another one. I would love to do another one. And maybe we could get on the next one into some more of the current events, more of the political issues. This one was just a lot of background and backstory. But anyway, so check that out.
All right, so let's get right into it. We're going to talk about the H-1B visas, and then we're going to go over some thoughts on the PBD interview. First and foremost with this H-1B visa, and we're going to leave the video that Howard Lutnick is saying that it is $100,000 annual fee.
H-1Bs are sometimes used by people already in the country legally on other visas or student visas. Does this apply to them or to renewals, or does it only apply to people applying for the first time from abroad?
Renewals, first times, the company needs to decide, do they want, is that person valuable enough to have $100,000 a year payment to the government, or they should head home and they should go hire an American. The whole idea, it's annual, and it's for total. It can be a total of 6 years. So $100,000 a year, so either the person is very valuable to the company and America, or they're going to depart and the company's going to hire an American, and that's the point of immigration. Hire Americans and make sure the people coming in are the top people. Stop the nonsense of letting people just come into this country on these visas that were given away for free. President is crystal clear. Valuable people only for America. Stop the nonsense.
And remember, the country...
It's just the fee, right?
Yeah.
Fee to America.
The country would rather not have to pay $100,000, but they'd rather, how do you do that? You hire Americans. So there's an incentive to hire American, but there may be instances where it's better off doing it through expertise or whatever it may be. But they're both unbelievable, whether it's a gold card or anything else that we talked about today.
I'm telling you, this administration and Donald Trump, they're losing credibility by the day. They're losing credibility by the day. And this is something that Nick brought up later on in this show. We'll play that video for y'all, or we'll have that video available for you all later on. But Nick brings up the point that imagine if Charlie Kirk did not pass, how we would be looking at Donald Trump's administration. We couldn't stand Donald Trump and his administration because they were lying to us with the Epstein files. You know, they campaigned on releasing the Epstein files and then act as if they didn't. And not only act as if they didn't, but they tell anybody who's asking for this information, like, we don't want your support. That's where we were before Charlie Kirk's passing. And then it seems like every single thing that they do, they're going against the things that they campaigned on. They're, instead of make America great again, they're doing anything and everything for Israel to just push whatever Israel's agenda and Bibi Netanyahu's agenda. That's what's happening. So let's not lose sight of that. But this is a finesse. This is a finesse. And it's getting to the point where it's like, did y'all not speak about this? And then I'll also show Karoline Leavitt's tweet in which she's talking about, matter of fact, let me bring that up as well. Let me bring that on the screen for y'all. So take a look at this. So as you can see, Karoline Leavitt, she makes it clear this is not an annual fee. It's a one-time fee that applies only to the petition. Those who already hold H-1B visas are currently outside of the country right now will not be charged $100,000 to re-enter. H-1B visa holders can leave and re-enter the country to the same extent as they normally would. Whatever ability they have to do that is not impacted by yesterday's proclamation. Number 3, this applies only to new visas, not renewals, and not current visa holders. It will first apply in the next upcoming lottery cycle. Now, Nick made this point as far as this is a bit misleading what y'all are doing. It's a bit misleading. It's a bit misleading because obviously what Donald Trump campaigned on, this is what he decided to campaign on, was addressing the illegal migration issue now with the people that have come here already. You know, this is what he was saying. He was saying they're deporting all these people, even thinking back to the tariffs. You know, the tariffs were supposed to incentivize companies to build their factories in America and then be able to obviously hire American workers. This is supposed to be along those same lines. It's supposed to work the same way. And it just reminds you of America and, you know, how America has always thrived on figuring out a way to get some type of cheap labor, whether it was slavery, whether it was sharecropping, whether it's the prison industry, or now with illegal migration. They're always trying to figure out a way. We are always trying to figure out a way to get extremely cheap labor. Now, a lot of other countries do that, but we like to say that we're better or look at ourselves as better, right? More humane. I don't know what's up with Donald Trump. I don't know what's up with this administration. I don't know what's up with Howard Lutnick, but I never attempted to know what's up with Howard Lutnick. I wasn't paying attention to Howard Lutnick when I was making my decision to support Donald Trump. But they are completely just letting this, they're letting this presidency just go by. And I don't know, it's like every day I have to ask myself, what do these people have on Donald Trump? What do these people have on Donald Trump? It's like you're making yourself look foolish. You're making yourself look foolish. Then you have carve-outs. I didn't look into the carve-outs, but Nick's saying, you know, it doesn't apply to doctors. I'm sure there's going to be other industries where it doesn't apply. If they weren't screaming this stuff out before the election and campaigning on it, then perhaps it wouldn't be as big of an issue or surprise to a lot of people. And how about you get the actual facts of the program straight before jumping out there and saying, oh, it's $100,000 annually, but then switch it up to say, oh, actually, that's just a one-time fee. Well, actually, and I think Nick even wrote that fee may not even be what it actually is. It may actually end up being around, I think he said around like $2,000, $3,000. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But Howard Lutnick looks like a fool. I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares. And it's like, why is he even there? Why is he even there? Wasn't Howard Lutnick the same person that called Trump like a buffoon or something like that? Like, why is he even there? Trump is supposed to be Mr. Petty, but for whatever reason, all of these people that are super pro-Israel, whatever they said about Donald Trump, he seems to just let go. He doesn't have that same Chris Christie energy that he had. I don't know what it is, but it's like, you got to call a spade a spade. But let's move on to the next topic that he was discussing. I actually was able to see Nick's PBD interview. I was one of those people calling out PBD for not having Nick Fuentes on. You can have these mob, bosses. You can have these hitmen. You can have all these gangsters. You can have whatever else on there, but you can't have Nick Fuentes on there. And you're using the excuse of him saying the N-word. And I was one of those people who said, nah, don't let that get in the way of having him on there. Now, I was also calling for Nick to like tone that down, tone the rhetoric down. And what's funny about it is, even in the interview, Patrick Bet-David mentioned that Nick, and when he was talking to somebody was asking PBD to have Nick on the show, and he said like, yo, he's been toning down. He hasn't been saying the N-word. PBD said, oh, well, he actually was saying it last week, which Nick was, which we talked about. And you still had him on the show. So what was really holding you back from having him on the show? What was really holding him back? And Nick mentioned something, an angle that I actually wasn't paying attention to, which when you have Nick Fuentes on your show and they do say something like it, and you have Nick Fuentes saying something like the N-word, which is going to obviously be offensive to a lot of people, all the people that you work with are looking at you funny, perhaps in a different way than you can have somebody who kills people, who murders people. Because let's say somebody's a hitman and you have him on the show. Yeah, he had Sammy the Bull on the show. Now, I don't know what Sammy the Bull has done, but whatever. Let's say Sammy the Bull harmed some people. As wrong as we can acknowledge that may be, it's not offensive to an entire group of people. That's why words can sometimes pierce a little bit more than even actions, right? Because Nick says that one word, now an entire group of people is offended. But somebody can kill somebody. And that's another actual, think about that. This is another thing that we think about when it comes to religion. Shouldn't every Christian take offense to somebody who's a murderer because that's violating one of God's commandments? The same way that Black people may take offense to Nick Fuentes saying the N-word, shouldn't a true Christian take offense to having a murderer on the show? So that's just maybe something else for us to think about. And I think that's going to be a reoccurring theme when we're discussing the second topic in the next video with Nick talking about Charlie Kirk's memorial. And Nick has some of the same thoughts that I always bring up when it comes to politicizing religion and how people conveniently choose to lean into religion when it works in their best interest, but not necessarily living by those religious standards. But let's get back to the interview. What were my thoughts on it? PBD obviously brought up what got Nick initially banned. And it's funny, I never even knew this. I didn't see that video, and are we going to leave the video? May or may not leave that video here with the young lady that was secretly taping Nick, asked him if having sex with a Black guy is the same thing as having sex with a dog. Nick said no, but then he said they're both degenerative. I already gave my response on that, what I feel about that on the last video. Not going to get too much into that, but they talked about that. And then Nick brought up the point that Ben Shapiro, it's funny, he was saying how, he actually acknowledged that is a racist statement. And he brought up the fact that Ben Shapiro was talking about ethnic cleansing in a blog that he wrote, on a blog, in an article, talked about removing Palestinians, Arabs from a particular area, of course, so they can have Israel, the greater Israel, whatever. I'm not trying to talk about the details, but he was talking about ethnic cleansing. And Patrick Bet-David didn't once, to my knowledge, say like, oh, that's wrong as well. He was even scrambling for it, like, well, is that really the definition of ethnic cleansing? It's like Patrick Bet-David, bro. Like, so Patrick Bet-David, it was still PBD-ish, where I felt like he was walking on eggshells, holding himself in, on his high horse, where he's saying that, like, Nick, I know it was a private conversation, but actually he didn't say it like that. He was just more so saying, like, for you to say something like this, that could be offensive to people. That's racist. And it's like, you'll call that out, but you won't call out what Ben Shapiro was pushing in an actual article compared to a private conversation that an 18-year-old was having. You'll call that out, but you won't call out Ben Shapiro's behavior, which it's kind of ironic that it's being played out right now. That same ethnic cleansing that Ben Shapiro was writing about before. So maybe Patrick Bet-David doesn't have a problem with it. Later on in the interview, he said, like, well, I believe that, Ben Shapiro should be forgiven, and as well as you, Nick. And it's just like, I don't know, but Nick was very complimentary. I'm sure that Nick is being a little bit strategic with this as well, because, Nick doesn't have a lot of people that will platform him, and he understands that people bringing him on the show perhaps is putting him, or they're taking a big risk, and that since a lot of people won't do it, you get a guy like Patrick Bet-David. If you can be a person that comes on his show rather frequently, that can be very positive for the movement, in my opinion. Very positive. So, I did think overall, looking back on it, removing a bit of my bias towards Patrick Bet-David for a bunch of different things, like his interview with Netanyahu. It's how he conducts himself, how he has certain conversations. I always go back to the Dan Bilzerian interview that he did with Patrick Bet-David, where PBD's like, I'm just like, yeah, why? What are you defending? Like, who's sponsoring you? I know like to brag about not having any sponsors, not being controlled, but your energy seems to change a bit, like a lot of people, perhaps like Trump, when it comes to Israel, comparing other people's victimhood. Like, you can call out the victimhood and everybody else, but it seems to change up when it comes to Israel, and that's a lot of people. So once I removed that bias, I thought it was a good interview because it allowed Nick to tell his story. It allowed, I think, a lot of people who may not be familiar with Nick to see a side of him that's probably a lot different than what has been portrayed. That would be my opinion. So let's keep going. And what else did they talk about? Yeah, and one thing that I have to give PBD credit for is he did not bring up the clip that Nick was referring to when he was saying certain things about Charlie Kirk and penetrating his organization. And it would have been taken out of context. It has been taken out of context, in my opinion. And it's been one of those videos that have been used to blame the Groypers for Charlie Kirk's assassination. So I was happy that Patrick Bet-David didn't play that, because it didn't seem like a hit piece type of interview. It seemed to be a lot different than, like, let's say the Candace Owens interview, which she clearly was trying to make him out to be like, she was trying to be combative, it seemed like. His was a bit different. Patrick Bet-David allowed Nick to speak, and I thought that was a very good thing. So let's do I have any other notes? Do I? And another thing, see, the funny part about it is, I think even a big difference between the interview between Patrick Bet-David and Dan Bilzerian, I think Patrick Bet-David likes Nick. I think that he actually likes Nick. I think he appreciates Nick, but I think that it was still a touchy thing having him there. And I think one of the main reasons that I told y'all I missed out on was because of his people. You have certain people there. It's like, yo, if your people get offended, it's hard to justify having, a guy like Nick there if you believe, based on the morals, principles, and values that you may tell your team that you live by and that your team should stand by, if you're bringing on a guy like Nick. So those are my thoughts on it. Overall, you heard how I feel about the H-1B visas with Howard Lutnick, and just that looking like another thing that the Trump administration has lied about. You heard my thoughts on PBD interview. I'm actually excited to have Nick on the show, hopefully with the rest of the cast, with Tom, Vinny, and Adam. I think those will be some good conversations, and we'll see where it goes. I think most importantly, I think it'll be good for Nick. So hopefully a lot of other people start to give him the opportunity to voice his opinion and to speak his thoughts, why he believes certain things, why he doesn't believe certain things, whatever it may be. I think that people should get back to having conversations. So on that note, I'll let y'all go. And as always, like, subscribe. We keep the videos coming for y'all. And give your thoughts. Especially tell me where I may be missing something. We all have blind spots, so let me know. And as always, appreciate the love that y'all continue to show. I'll see you on the next one.
It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.